Hello, I'm Joel.
And I'm Alex.
Welcome to the Commander's Journey,
Journey.
the place where we discuss our favorite format of Magic, Commander, from the perspective of a new player.
And an experienced one.
This journey is for new Magic players interested in Commander. So here we go again, Alex, another deck tech. This time I kind of like to call it my special homebrew deck tech. This is a card I was eyeballing when the Commander cards were coming out. Commander 2020, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, this is a Joel baby right here.
A Joel baby, okay.
Yep.
Well, I hope I don't give birth to something like this, a Nightmare Beast. So this card, it comes in one of the pre-con decks, the Abzan one, and this is not the face commander. This is Tayam, Luminous Enigma. It's one, a white, a black, and a green for legendary creature Nightmare Beast. Each other creature you control enters the battlefield with an additional vigilance counter on it. And for 3, you can remove 3 counters from among creatures you control, put the top 3 cards of your library in your graveyard, then return a permanent card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. And it's a 3/3. So I was eyeballing it because I really wanted to have a graveyard commander. I don't have one yet. And it just looked like a lot of fun. You mean you got to jump through a bunch of hoops. You get to play with counters. You get to mill yourself. It just looked like a lot of fun to play.
Yeah, this one definitely looked at from my point of view, Joel, a natural progression for you. Definitely right up your alley.
Yeah. So, yeah, look good.
So, Joel, what would you say is the general game plan of the deck?
So, just because of the way Tayam wants to play, I realized at first I just need to get a lot of counters out there, right? And all sorts of, the nice thing is it doesn't just say +1/+1 counters. It can be any sort of counter. So the game plan is just to synergize really well with a bunch of counters, use that to mill yourself, pull cards out. But I've been finding that the way this deck wants to win is just going wide. So the game plan is to get as many creatures out there, get as much value on the battlefield as possible, and then just start swinging in with the team until you win. Basic Magic.
Well, there you go. Go wide strategies too. It's really kind of fun to do it, especially because the most common ways with tokens, I really like that this deck doesn't go too token heavy at all. It's really more based on just playing creatures every turn, getting that value, and just getting a lot of things out there.
Yeah, and because Tayam's giving everybody vigilance, you're able to swing in with people, and if you can increase those counters, you can still use those counters or not. But you get to swing in, and you still have blockers if you need them.
Awesome. So, Joel, what would you say are the best synergistic game plan cards for the deck, that bread and butter?
So I think the first one is Dead Bridge Chant. Did you want to read it?
Yes, I'll take this one. Dead Bridge Chant is 4 black and a green for an enchantment. When Dead Bridge Chant enters the battlefield, put the top 10 cards of your library into your graveyard. And at the beginning of your upkeep, choose a card at random in your graveyard. If it's a creature card, put it onto the battlefield. Otherwise, put it in your hand.
So this card's great because Tayam already wants you to be milling yourself, and this just gets you going. It gets the juices flowing, right? It gets 10 cards in there. I found a lot of times if I don't have enough things in my graveyard by the time I'm getting Tayam out and moving, I don't always have those 3 or less permanents to get back onto the battlefield. So this is a great way to do it. Plus, every turn on your upkeep, you're going to be getting a card, and it's either going to the battlefield or it's going into your hand. Just it synergizes and works so perfect with this deck.
This is really a fantastic card. Holy cow. I definitely see the value in this one.
Yeah, and it came with the pre-con, and I kept it in there for sure.
I definitely think that's the right call. Holy cow. Another great card in your game plan is Yawgmoth, Thran Physician, 2 black and a black for a legendary creature, Human Cleric. Protection from humans. Pay 1 life, sacrifice another creature, put a -1/-1 counter on target creature, and draw a card. It also has for a black and discard a card you can proliferate, and it's a 2/4. And proliferate, of course, you choose any number of permanents and or players and give them each another counter of that each kind already there. So you pick and choose what counter you want to add one to.
Exactly. And I had to have. There's definitely a few cards in this deck that have proliferate on it, just because you have so many counters going out. It just makes sense because if you got 3-4 creatures out, you proliferate. You're getting 3-4 counters each time. It's all value. But this card's just an excellent card. I mean, Yawgmoth, a mono black commander on his own. Just so much he can do with pain, life, sack creature, and you get those -1 counters to draw a card. But with Tayam, you can use those -1 counters to your advantage, right? You can just use those to pay for your for Tayam's abilities, so you can mill yourself. So you're not killing off your creatures indefinitely with this card, and it works so well in this deck.
Yeah, speaking of proliferate, Evolution Sage, another great card in the deck. It's 2 and a green for a creature elf druid. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, proliferate. It's a 3/2.
Yeah, had to put Evolution Sage in this deck. Plus for me, she came with War of the Spark, which is the first set I started playing Magic on right there. So had to get that proliferate in.
Yeah, I definitely was excited about the reprint of Proliferate and War of the Spark. It really went perfectly with the set. I mean, I thought that was a real win there.
Mm-hmm.
The last card we have, the real bread and butter for the deck, is Cathar's Crusade, 3 white and a white for an enchantment. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control.
Yeah, so this card is super powerful in so many decks, right? And it's great in token decks. It's great in any deck where you're dropping creatures, but especially in this one, where you use these counters, right? You sometimes you want to be pumping up everybody and swinging in, but with Tayam, you're adding counters to everything on your board every time something comes in, and then you're using those to bring something else in, which then triggers Cathar's Crusade again, right? So this thing can just get out of control if you have enough creatures out while you're using, and you got enough mana to pay for things. It can really help out with the game plan.
I really like Cathar's Crusade. Definitely one of those cards that I was surprised when it was as low as it was. Now it's not that cheap anymore, and I'm kind of thinking this is where it should have been the whole time. But I'm also really sad now it's that price. I liked it when it was a little more attainable.
You got to buy a few of them. I think it went back down a little bit. Didn't they think they reprinted it? No, didn't they?
Well,
not?
they reprint and Jumpstart, but I don't know how much Jumpstart's affecting the prices here.
Well, hopefully a little bit.
A little bit. So on to best synergistic ramp cards, and we like dividing this up in sections for what the deck really needs as a good commander deck. And right off the bat is a great ramp card in this deck. Rishkar Pima Renegade. It's 2 and a green for legendary creature elf druid. When Rishkar Pima Renegade enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures. And each creature you control with the counter on it has tap, add a green mana. It's a 2/2.
And what's key about Rishkar is the fact that it says each creature you control with a counter on it. It doesn't say it has to be a +1/+1 counter. So not only those 2 cards that are going to get the +1/+1s from him are going to be able to tap as mana dorks, basically. But every card that's on your battlefield, if you still have your vigilance counter on it from Tayam, once Rishkar comes out, you've just ramped that much. So if you got 6 creatures out, right, already, and then you play Rishkar, now you got 6 creatures that can tap. You got 6 mana. So Rishkar is just so synergistic, and it can really ramp you pretty fast in this deck. The only thing I would say is, because you're so used to using the vigilance and swinging without tapping, you do find yourself wanting to tap all your creatures and leaving yourself open for attacks. But other than that, if you need to draw a big spell, Pima is giving you a lot of value.
Yeah, we ran into that once or twice testing this deck out.
Yeah.
Oh god. Another great ramp card in the deck is another mana dork. It's Incubation Druid. It's 1 and a green for a creature elf druid. It says tap, add 1 mana of any type that a land you control could produce. If Incubation Druid has a +1/+1 counter on it, add 3 mana of that type instead. It also does have 3 green and green for adapt 3, which as this creature has no +1/+1 counters on it, you may put 3 +1/+1 counters on it, and it's a 0/2.
So Incubation Druid is great. It's a 2 for a mana dork. And then something in this deck. There's many ways in this deck where you can get +1/+1 counters put on it, right? With Cathar's Crusade or and adding more counters onto this druid. But if that's not out, you can always use 5 mana to do it to itself. It's just, and then if you wanted to, right, you adapted 3. You can still use 2 of those +1/+1 counters as fuel for Tayam and keep one of those counters on just so that it can continue to tap for 3. But it's really good.
And the last card we have in this category is Black Market. We seem to talk about the cuss card a lot, Joel. It's
Yes.
a 3 black and a black for an enchantment. Whenever a creature dies, put a charge counter on Black Market, and at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, add black for each charge counter on Black Market.
Well, there's a reason we've talked about it a lot, though, Alex, is because when the very first deck I built was an Orzhov deck, and it struggled with ramp, and so and it was a sack deck, right? So this card helped out with that a lot, and I've been finding a lot of decks with black. I've always considered it, and this one it just made complete sense, right? Creatures are going to die on your side of the board and around the table, and every time you do, you're going to get these counters. You're going to have these counters, and you're going to want to use this as ramp most of the time. But if you have to, you can remove these counters also from Black Market and use them as fuel. So I just wanted to have so many things in this deck that just had that ability to have different kinds of counters and many different kinds of counters, just so that if I wanted to or needed to use it for a big play, I could.
And I notice here that it doesn't specifically counter or combo with Tayam, but you do have other things that take advantage of counters that the deck will really like, right?
Yeah, so I couldn't take it. Yeah, Tayam has to remove the counter from a creature, is right. But there's another card in here, a land, Nesting Grounds, I believe, which allows you to move those counters. So I could take a counter from Black Market, move it on to, say, a creature, and then use those counters as fuel. So it is a little bit slower in that way, but it's also really good, just because you're going to have a lot of that black mana to spend.
Yeah, and Nesting Grounds, just so everyone knows, is a land. It says it can tap for a colorless, and also 1 and tap. Move a counter from target permanent you control to another target permanent. Activate this ability only anytime you could cast a sorcery.
Yeah, so you would only be able to move 1 counter at a time, but there's still value there. It just seemed to make sense for a ramp strategy here.
Yeah, no, totally. It seems very powerful to me. We can move on to our synergistic card draw in the deck. This one, God knows I love a charm, and I rather like this one as well. I'm a fan of the Naya charm, but I will say this one's right behind it. It's the Abzan charm. It's white, black, and a green for an instant. Choose one. Exile target creature with power 3 or greater, or you draw 2 cards and you lose 2 life, or distribute 2 +1/+1 counters among 1 or 2 target creatures.
Yeah, and I ended up slotting this into my card. You could slot this into your removal, category. You can slot this into your synergy. I slotted it into my card draw category, but you don't have to draw 2 cards, right? With this, you could use it to exile a creature. You can use it to add counters, which is everything this deck wants to do. So it fits 2 of your categories and it helps you get counters out. It's a good card for this deck. For
I
sure.
love me a charm, Joel. I love me a charm.
I know you do.
Totally underplayed the charms. Another great card draw card you have in the deck is Tireless Tracker. 2 and a green for a creature Human Scout. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, investigate. And when you investigate, you put a colorless clue artifact token into play with pay 2 generic mana, sacrifice this artifact, draw a card. And it says whenever you sacrifice a clue, put a +1/+1 counter on Tireless Tracker. It's a 3/2.
So what I love about this card is the fact that it's gonna allow you to draw cards and allow you to get counters and allow you to do it more than once. And I just think every time you have card draw spells, it's nice to have those ones that just, and we have other ones in here like Read the Bones that just allow you to scry 2, draw 2. But this is nice because you can do this over and over and over again. It's repeatable. Repeatable card draw is really good.
Yeah, and I want to point out too that Tireless Tracker is only 3 mana, so you can bring it back with The commander Tayam, same thing with
Yes.
Pima that we talked about, Incubation Druid, and a couple others that we're going to get into here. So when we go into our best synergistic single target removal, the first one we have up also works great with the commander is Darksteel Mutation. One white for an enchantment aura, enchant creature. Enchanted creature is an insect artifact creature with base power and toughness 0/1 and has indestructible, and it loses all of their abilities, card types, and creature types.
Yeah, so it's great to have a Swords to Plowshares in your white decks, right? And there's one in this deck as well. But I'm just starting to fall in love with these enchantment auras that just you can cast on another person's creature, and then it's like there's nothing they can do about it except remove the enchantment, right? So because you get something that's indestructible, you just and you can't deal with it, you just Darksteel Mutation it, you know. You can keep your indestructibility, but by the way, you also lose all your abilities and you can't play. And then, like you were alluding to there, with the fact that it's only 2 mana, right? It's repeatable. You can bring it back because there's a lot of recursion in this deck. So recurring of creatures and recurring of permanents, and Tayam recurs permanents that are 3 or less. So you can utilize it, and then if somebody does remove it, you can always dig it right back out again. I think that first game I played against you, I did Darksteel Mutation you more than once.
I think you did it 2 or 3 times, and that
Yeah,
just
2 or 3.
eventually took me way out of the game.
Yeah, so it's just being able to have repeatable ways to deal with your opponents is great. I know people have been playing some of the cards in Tayam where you bring it back and it makes everybody sacrifice a creature or whatnot, which is also good. But I just like I'm liking these auras a lot because they don't just deal with the problem, but they also sometimes kind of put the person in stalemate a little bit if they have no way to handle it.
And you also have Lignify in the deck, which is 1 a green for a tribal enchantment Treefolk aura. As enchanted creatures loses all abilities and is a Treefolk with base power and toughness 0/4.
Well, it's very much the same thing. It's just the green way to do it, right? So the fact that you're making them lose all abilities, and I like to play these against that. You know, you're going to play it against the person's commander or their most powerful card or whatever is giving you problems on the other side, and you can bring it back if you need to.
And our last card we have in this card category is another favorite of mine, Joel. I know it's a favorite of yours as well. Is Aura Shards. It's 1 green, a white for an enchantment. Whenever a creature enters a battlefield under your control, you may destroy target artifact or enchantment.
This is a super powerful card, and some people might feel kind of sour when this card is played. But you got to deal with it because if you don't, you're gonna have you're gonna have boards just being picked off left and right. So yeah, the fact that you're going to be playing creatures, and it's when the creature enters the battlefield. So even if you dig it out of your graveyard and enters the battlefield, you're still picking off people's artifacts and enchantments. So, and then plus it also costs 3 mana. So if it dies, if somebody removes this enchantment, you can use Tayam to bring it right back.
That just sounds so scary, bringing back an Aura Shards. I mean, I think that's the main reason why you play Selesnya, at least for me anyways, is if I'm not doing a budget deck, I want to throw an Aura Shards in there every Selesnya deck I can, which is white and green. And then in this one, you can use that black mana you also have in there, that your Abzan colors, and bring it right back like it didn't even leave.
Nope, it's always there.
So, we have a category here, which is best synergistic board wipes. Now, I know you don't have one in mind, but we did want to talk about one card that really helps out because it helps you recover from a board wipe quite heavily. And that is the Ozolith. It's 1 generic mana for a legendary artifact. Whenever a creature you control leaves the battlefield, if it had counters on it, put those counters on the Ozolith instead. And at the beginning of combat on your turn, if the Ozolith has counters on it, you may move all counters from the Ozolith onto target creature.
Yeah, so it's just there's board wipes in this deck, but this card, if you have it on the battlefield while you use one of your board wipes or while somebody else board wipes, you're not gonna. And of course, if it doesn't board wipe your artifacts, it's you're just gonna save all those counters. I mean, you might have put all this effort and have like 7, 10, 20 counters out there, and if you get board wiped, all that work is gone. With the Ozolith, work's not gone. You can keep your counters and use them next time around.
Yeah. Speaking of which, We'll move right into recursion because this deck has a lot of recursion, and so we're going to move into our
Mm-hmm.
recursion protection category. Holy cow, Joel! This deck is recurring like no one's business. Nothing's out.
Yeah. I actually had to trim out some recursion. Like when I was building and when I was brewing this, I'm looking at it, I'm going, I have too much recursion in here. I need to recur things that don't just recur things. I need to recur things that do damage. So,
So let's look at one of the go-to recursion and its protection in the deck. It's both. Luminous Brood Moth, just printed in Ikoria. It's 2 white and a
mm-hmm.
white for a creature insect, has flying. Whenever a creature you control without flying dies, return to the battlefield under its owner's control with a flying counter on it. It's a 3/4.
Yeah, I mean, you see how when this commander set came out and Ikoria came out at the same time, um, when we were looking at all the spoilers, the Ozolith and this card, Luminous Broodmoth, whenever I decided I wanted to build Tayam, were the first 2 cards. Like, nope, they just work so well together. Like, there's no way those cards don't go together, because it doesn't just recur the card that dies. Because there's a few cards we hear with flying, so this won't work on it. But not all. Most of the cards don't fly, so you're just bringing it right back to the battlefield with a flying counter on it, and then you just use that flying counter for Tayam's ability, and then guess what? If it dies again, you can bring it right back again, and then you can use the flying counter. And the thing is, the trick is to keep paying and using the flying counter so that nothing ever keeps a flying counter on it, and the Brood Moth can always bring it back. Plus, if there's a board wipe, you allow all the other creatures to die first, and Brood Moth will bring them back, and then Brood Moth will die, go to the graveyard, and you can find another way to recur him.
Yeah, and I know too. The fact that you can keep that flying counter on it to the last second, and then using
Mm-hmm.
Tayam's ability at instant speed, just yank it off. Holy cow, that's powerful.
Yeah, and then that's also fun because most of your stuff, like with if you got Rishkar out there, you're using a lot of your and that's happened. Like where there's a board wipe, but it's like you don't necessarily have lands up, but Rishkar's turned all your creatures into mana dorks, so you can use all that mana, use up all those flying counters, and then that would just bring all your guys right back.
And speaking of another thing that both protects and recurs cards in your deck is Cauldron of Souls. It's 5 generic for an artifact. Tap, choose any number of target creatures. Each of those creatures gains persist until end of turn. And persist says when it dies, if it had no -1/-1 counters on it, return to the battlefield under its owner's control with a -1/-1 counter on it.
Yeah, this card does something very similar, in a different way. In an instant speed, you can just tap this, and if you're getting wiped or you're getting targeted, just turn your creatures into persist creatures, bring them back, then use those -1, -1 counters as payment for Tayam's ability. So, just to me, definitely want to have one of the Cauldron of Souls in this deck.
Yeah, and I know too, Joel, we have one interesting little protection combo that I know you wanted to talk about in the deck.
Yes.
And actually, on this one, Joel, why don't you let's say the 2 cards and explain what they're going to do together?
Yeah. So when I was building the deck, I'm like, I want to protect myself uh, from like somebody trying to bazooka bog my graveyard, right? Or somebody to do that. I want to at least have one way, or I couldn't find a lot of ways, right, to protect myself. So you were telling me that there's this counterspell in white. So there's a counterspell in white that then also puts the card back up on the top of the person's library. But then, so that card is Lapse of Certainty, and then the other card that would work with it in a funny way, Sir Conrad the Grim. I can use that, pay 1 in a black, and then make that person take that card from the top of their library and put it into their graveyard. So, since Lapse of Certainty isn't such a great way to counter something because it gives it right back to them, if you then utilize Sir Conrad, you can then bury, at least in their graveyard, that item.
It's a build your own counter spell.
Yep. Yep. And it doesn't always happen because you're not always going to have Sir Conrad out. But if you do and you have Lapse of Certainty as your way to, counter, it could be pretty fun. Pretty fun to do.
I think too, it's kind of nice having a card that's you're not having blue, but you still got to found a way to get a counter spell in the deck. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, I think it's fun because it kind of comes out of nowhere. Nobody's expecting you to counter something, right? It's black.
No,
It's
not from your
Abzan. It's an
deck.
Abzan deck. They're not expecting you to be countered, so they're expecting to be removed or attacked, but not countered.
um, Speaking of which, this is a category that was more aimed at Joel because I have a tendency not to put tutors in my decks, but Joel did for this one.
Yes.
Best synergistic tutors. We have Recruiter of the Guard. It's 2 and a white for a creature human soldier. When Recruiter of the Guard enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a creature card with toughness 2 or less, reveal it, and put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. It's a 1/1.
And this only costs 2 and a white, right? So that's the big reason I wanted this. Uh, I put 2 tutors in here, and I like to find tutors that kind of go with the deck. And this is mainly in here so I can go find one of my big bombs, which we'll talk about a little later, or I have a little combo or nombo type thing going on. So you want to be able to find ways to get those cards. But Recruiter the Guard also costs only 3 mana, which means you can dig this out of your graveyard with Tayam's ability. You can do it multiple times. And there's a lot of cards in here that have toughness 2 or less. There's a lot of small creatures in here. So this card is just, it's a recurable tutor in this deck. So it works really, really well.
Yeah, it looks fantastic. So move on to going over our win con. If you want to talk about that, Joel.
Yeah, so we went over earlier, with the game plan. Basically, we want to go wide. And I think the best way to go wide is this card here, which also showed up in the latest set, Eerie Ultimatum. It's white, black, black, green. For sorcery, it says return any number of permanent cards with different names from your graveyard to the battlefield. And I think it's just, the card is just the epitome of what this deck wants to do. If you play this, if you're able to play Eerie Ultimatum in the game of Commander, you're going to be able to get these colors, and you're going to play it. You're going to get everything. Like it says, permanents with different names, so that means your forest, all your different lands, everything's coming to the battlefield. And then you're just going to go wide and swing in and kill everybody. So that's the way this deck really wants to win, is just to get a lot of value on the battlefield, and then just keep chipping and chipping away. Now, again, we play this a lot 1v1. I think 4-player it might play out a little different, but Eerie Ultimatum, either way, once you get your entire graveyard onto the battlefield, you should be able to win the game, hopefully, at that point.
And I know too, Joel, you put a nice Devoted Druid combo in the deck. I'll quickly read Devoted Druid here. Devoted Druid is 1 and a green for a creature elf druid with tap, add a green. And then it says put a -1/-1 counter on Devoted Druid and untap Devoted Druid. It's a 0/2. And then the other part of your combo that you have is Blossoming Defense, which is a single green mana for an instant. And it's a star creature you control gets +2/+2 and gains hexproof until end of turn.
Yeah, so I wanted to find a different combo. I looked at Devoted Druid and read a lot about people using this and different ways to combo with it. And I got to give credit to one of these EDH Facebook groups I was on, and I was asking questions, and somebody threw this up there with Blossoming Defense. I didn't realize that card existed. Again, I'm newer to this game, so I was like, well, that's great because you can just pump them up by 2. So if you're able to pump up Devoted Druid by 2, every time you tap him and you put those -1/-1 counters on him, now that he's not a 0/2 anymore, he's a 2/4, you won't kill him outright. And you can utilize him to basically go through and draw your deck, mill yourself, and put them on the board every time you do. So that should help you to get all those pieces onto the battlefield, go wide, and win the game like that.
So another build your own Eerie Ultimatum.
Basically, yeah, it's not 1 card of Eerie; it's kind of 2 cards to make Eerie. But yeah, but no, it's even better because it mills the deck and then puts it on the battlefield, right? So you're taking it right from your library. So in case you don't have that much in your graveyard, right, Eerie wouldn't do as much damage. So either way, and then again, something you point out to me, which is important to note, that if you do use this combo, it could very well become a non-bow if you have Yeah, if you have Peer out, or if you have Winding Constrictor out, because they won't work together. You'll end up killing yourself too quickly. The druid
Yeah,
will kill itself.
specifically, both Pure and Winding, they don't give you a choice when you put the -1/-1 counter on Devoted Druid. They always
Yeah,
add an extra counter on it. So
yeah,
you'll when you attempt to use Devoted Druid's ability, you'll put 2 -1/- counter on it,
exactly.
which will not work with the combo course. It will just kill Devoted Druid very quickly, or you can only get you 2 mana, one or the other.
Exactly. So you'd set. So if going the Devoted Druid route is more what you want to do, I know a lot of people have been going that route where, I tried to steer away. Tayam, there are a lot of people going down that route of just like having ways to recur with Devoted Druid and some of these other cards, and then use um, aristocrat type of strategy to also just keep pinging everybody. But I just had too many decks with aristocrat strategies in them already where I was winning that way, that I wanted to play Tayam differently, and I didn't want to win in that way. So I'm just wanting to go wide. And so that's why I only put the one in here, but I think it could very well help me out if I need it.
And I noticed too, you also have an alt win con in the deck with Vraska the Unseen. 3
Yes.
black and a green for a legendary planeswalker Vraska for
Mm-hmm.
+1 untap or until your next turn. Whenever a creature deals damage to Vraska the Unseen, destroy that creature. A fantastic way to protect the creature. It also has for -3 destroy target non-land permanent. And
Mm-hmm.
then for -7, create 3 1/1 black assassin creature tokens. With whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, that player loses the game and has 5 loyalty.
Yeah, it's a great way to just have a fun little win con out there. And it kind of, Vraska likes to protect. It does a decent job. I've been able to ult with it more than once because it protects itself pretty well with that +1. That if somebody does try and come into, uh, fight or kill it by attacking it, it it basically has death touch and that thing will die. So yeah, it does get there. And then also being able to destroy a target non-land permanent is super great. I've had to use that a lot too. So just a easy add for me in this deck.
Yeah, that's a great removal spell there as
Mm-hmm.
well. So you had a couple weaknesses in the deck, Joel.
Yeah, so this deck, it just has a slow start and it takes time to set up. I think because there's so many things and hoops that Tayam needs to jump through for it to get going. It just takes a little while to get things out. You need to make sure you're ramping a little. You got to get your commander out there before you start dropping creatures to start building up your counters, and hopefully have something to help double it to kind of get that going quicker, and ways to mill yourself. So you're doing a few things, right? You're milling yourself. You're trying to get counters out. So it takes a little bit of time to set up. There are some cards that help protect you, some cards that you can use in that way, and there's a lot of recursion, so that can help. So you don't just, get wiped out of left field and then have no way to recover. But it does take some time. And also another weakness it has is it's really doesn't have a lot of big creatures. There's a few death touchers. There's a few decent sized things in here, but not that many. So against big trampoly decks, big stompy decks, it wouldn't stand very well. You'd have to use a lot of removal and just, pray you don't get trampled over. um, yep.
Yeah,
And then also we like to talk about easy upgrades, right? So I think in order to slight that slow start, right, the easy upgrade for this deck seems to be just improving the mana base a little bit. Um, adding some quicker lands in there and some ways to get things going even faster. This I do have about 10 ways to ramp in this deck, maybe 11 if you count. Yeah, maybe 10 or 11 or so. So, but if you can improve the mana base just a little bit better, it might help you out.
looking at those fetch lands for those who have it.
Yeah, but we try and keep everything at the 250 mark with our decks that aren't budget, so that it's within a reasonable price range. But yeah, if we added all those extra lands in there, for sure, it would break the wallet, but it would help the deck.
Well, awesome. That is our Tayam deck tech. Joel, fantastic deck you have here. I'm looking forward to having you play it and to fight against it quite a lot.
Well, I got it in real life. I'm going to be bringing it to the next Commander night, so you better get ready.
Looking forward to it. So yeah, for those of you on the podcast, please subscribe on whatever podcast you use. Those of you who are on YouTube, please subscribe there. If you're on YouTube, don't forget to hit the bell or give us thumbs up, and feel free to leave us a comment. Let us know how we're doing.
Yeah, and then we will have a link to the deck below, and our affiliate link with TCG. So if you feel like you want to look at some of these cards, maybe get some, or maybe you like this deck and you want to get the deck, please use our link down below. It helps us out. It's really helpful. Thank you for that. And there's also a link to the Arca deck that'll you can just take a look at the deck and see what you have. Because for me, I bought the pre-con, and then I started brewing with cards I had, and then added to that, which was fun. But you can see that down below.
Yeah. And please let us know. Please use the affiliate link, help us out, and we'll see you next time.
All right, see ya.